main gate of, well, not the main gate, actually the side gate of the Faculty of Theology, just down there. But the reason I'm stopping here is because I want to show you one of my favorite little pictures on the Theology faculty grounds. So as many of you know, I drive a Vespa, a beautiful Vespa scooter, and the students are making fun of me. Look at this. Here's a sign that says drive carefully, don't ride over the squirrels, and look what they painted there. A squirrel on a Vespa, hey? How cool is that? So either they think I'm a squirrel on a Vespa, or they're just trying to make fun of my Vespa driving. I'm normally very careful. I haven't yet ever driven over anything living, other than myself, of course. I broke my leg a couple of years ago in an accident, but no squirrels. Okay, so that beautiful river that I walk next to is just on the back end of the Faculty of Theology here in Stellenbosch, and it's often a route that I walk, just an extra little loop if I'm heading onto campus or if I need to do something in town, because it's such a beautiful, relaxing, wonderful space that just reconnects me with nature. Absolutely wonderful, and always good just to clear the head and renew the heart. Okay, so the last time that I recorded on this bridge was when I did a little video on human dignity, looking specifically at the work of Jürgen Moltmann and Douglas Meeks. But today I want to talk about something slightly different. Today I want to talk about the notion of the formation of public opinion, and particularly how social media is affecting or changing the ways in which we form and cement our opinions about issues of public concern. So the issue that came into mind actually came to me from listening to a podcast. One of my favorite podcasts to listen to is Stephen Dubner and Stephen Levitt, who are the authors of that wonderful book series, Freakonomics and Super Freakonomics. And I've read those books and I listened to their podcast. They do some very, very interesting work. But recently they had a podcast in which they talked about how Facebook uses an algorithm in order to decide what appears at the top of your Facebook feed. I'm sure you've noticed that. You have to go hunting sometimes to find the stuff that you're looking for. Now the point that Dubner and Levin make is that the algorithm that Facebook uses is an algorithm that's designed to keep you on Facebook for as long as possible, because even though we forget it, for us Facebook may be a social media site, Facebook is actually a business, and their business is advertising, and the longer they can keep you on the site, the longer they can keep you looking at content that grabs your attention, that keeps you coming back, the more they can advertise to you. Now, one of the big problems with that is that that particular algorithm is driven by a very clear economic incentive. So it's not there to create the free flow of information. It's not there to allow you to know what's happening on, in other words, to get the pulse of what's happening in society. It's there to keep you coming back. And so the one thing that we've seen, and I'm sure if you go and check your Facebook on this, is that you'll find that the kind of things that the Facebook algorithm allows through, almost like a form of censorship, is the kind of stuff that is cute, the kind of stuff that perhaps is not inflammatory, the kind of stuff that perhaps is not shocking for people, the kind of stuff that perhaps is just good news, the birth of babies, kittens jumping off tables. Those kinds of things tend to dominate our Facebook feeds. And so what they found was that if a particular event is happening in the news, for example, last year when the Black Lives Matter and I Can't Breathe movements took place in the United States, there was a very different population of social media on Twitter and on Facebook. So Twitter has no algorithm as of yet, although they are introducing more and more advertising. But on Twitter you just get a steady flow of news from people who you follow, whose tweets show up on your Twitter feed. On Facebook, however, they try and work out what is it that you like most. And if you like the fact that someone's having a birthday, or that someone got engaged, or they had their baby, they tend to prioritize those things. And in order to go and search for the kind of stuff that is news, you really have to dig down into your feed. Sometimes you won't even find it. You actually have to type in a search to discover it. And the point that they are trying to make there is that there is almost a sort of a closed loop of opinion, a sort of closed circle that cements the identity of the kind of things that you like or you look for, or the kind of things that you prefer. They come to the top of the page and you begin to live uncritically almost, thinking that everybody likes the kind of things that you do. Of course, your circle of friends or your family or your community may share those particular views. In public theology, we think a little bit about this, and we speak about this in terms of what we call the formation of the different publics of society. Now, Jürgen Habermas was the first person who really articulated this in contemporary philosophy, and he used a particular theory called critical discourse theory. Now, I'm sure many of the viewers of this blog will know a lot more about Habermas and critical discourse theory than I do, but let me summarize for you just very briefly what Habermas's theory said. So Habermas said that this notion of a public opinion was something that began to form when people began to get their political and economic independence in fairly recent times in history. So he said, if you remember, thinking back to early social, political and religious history, most people's opinions were based on one or two very dominant structures in society. The dominant structure of the ruling monarch. So you were a serf, you lived at the behest of a king, and you adopted his will for your survival, your economic and your political survival. And then the other one was the church. The church tended to form what people believed in terms of their social or moral or religious values. And these two very dominant forces in society, with their publications, with their means of communication, tended to dominate the way in which people formed their opinions. But as the emergence of guilds came out, so woodworking guilds and leather workers and metal workers, and people began to get economic independence from the monarchs and the kings and the rulers and the landowners, and begin to be able to take care of themselves economically, and they begin to recognize that these rulers didn't always have the best political intentions at heart. They began to find ways to form their own opinions in opposition to those of the kings. In a religious sense, of course, the Gutenberg Press and the dissemination of information after that press was another way in which people began to form their own opinions. And this was the emergence for the first time of an opinion which was different from the monarch's opinion or the religious opinion, and it became known as a sort of a public opinion. A new public was forming around these opinions. And so you found people clustering around these thought concepts. And often they would not only think about these things in the same way, but they would meet and debate and discuss them. So here's the challenge. This is the thing that's been striking me in terms of Facebook particularly. So many of us live our lives on these social media, and we do it uncritically. And it's almost as if Facebook is removing our critical thought aspect and replacing our public opinion with a sort of enforced bias, a way of viewing the world which is not based on the free flow of information, but it's driven by a very particular capitalist, neoliberal capitalist model of economics, which is there to enrich the organization, so the owner of the information, Facebook. And so perhaps today I want to encourage you just to think a little bit about your religious ideas and how they're formed, your social identity, what you think is proper for people of the particular groups with which you identify, what you think about people who fit into other social, ethnic, religious groups other than yours, and how something like Facebook may be misinforming you in that regard. So remember, this is not a lecture, it's just a thought. As for myself, I've learnt or encouraged myself to become a lot more critical, a lot more discerning about how I use Facebook for the formation of my opinion. I tend not to treat it as a source that forms my opinion. I still tend to rely a little bit more on edited and curated media, which of course has its own heuristics and biases and hermeneutics, but also sites that allow freer flow of democratic information, like Twitter and those. So maybe I can encourage you to think a little bit about that and to think a little bit about how your opinions are formed and enforced. So thanks for watching today's vlog. I hope you found it interesting. Leave me a comment if you agree, if you know more about Habermas or any of these areas or have something to add. Please drop me a comment in the comment section below. Hook up with me on Twitter at Digital Dion, on Instagram, on Facebook, and I'd love to stay connected with you. And of course, if you found it useful, please subscribe. I'd love to stay in contact with you. So thanks for watching today. I have to get back to class. My students are writing a test this afternoon, Human Dignity, second year class at 4 p.m. So I want to go and be there with them as they write. Thanks for watching.